My next must-have is Calvin Ridley. I've talked about Calvin Ridley a ton, but in case you missed it, I'm going to talk about Calvin Ridley again here. Look, despite having to play with Mason Rudolph and Will Levis last year, still went over 1,000 receiving yards. But he had the most unrealized air yards of any player last year. He had over 1,000 unrealized air yards last year. And if you don't know what unrealized air yards, that's basically the yards that ball traveled in the air that did not result in a completion. So literally the ball was thrown another 1,000 yards to him, didn't result in a completion. Why? Because his catchable target rate ranked 97th among all wide receivers. 97th! That means 96 wide receivers had more catchable targets than Calvin Ridley last year. Basically, none of his targets were catchable, or hardly any of his targets were catchable. What I really love about him this year, he had the third most deep targets last year and the fifth highest ADOT. And that is going to be perfect for this matchup with Cam Ward, who not only loves to throw the deep ball, but is very good at throwing the deep ball. If you look at the first preseason game for Cam Ward, 63% of his attempts traveled 10 or more yards in the air, which led all QBs in the preseason in week 1. He also had the 7th highest air yards per attempt, and 80% of his completions gained 10 or more yards. He's not a guy who's going to take the easy check down. He's going to throw the ball down the field. Kind of like what I said about Jaden Daniels last year with Terry McLaurin. Oh, and by the way, in that preseason game, did you happen to notice what Calvin Ridley did? He got 3 of Cam Ward's 8 targets and caught all of them for 50 yards. Now, I know it's preseason. We don't want to overreact to preseason, but this is what we're going to see. We're going to see Cam Ward and Calvin Ridley hit on a ton of deep targets this year, like we saw with Jaden Daniels and Terry McLaurin last year. And look, Calvin Ridley is far from dust. I know he's getting up there in age, but you look at it last year, he had a 75% success rate versus man, 78% versus press, and 79% versus zone. Sure, he's not an elite wide receiver like he was back in, Atlanta before he decided to go gamble or anything, but he's still a very good wide receiver. And like you said with Drake London, who is taking targets away from him in this offense? Nobody. He's going to get a ton of targets. He's going to get a ton of deep targets, and he's actually going to catch those deep targets this year.